about that and what other economic indicators are telling us about the president and his party's policies. Democratic strategist Kevin Walling, FreedomWorks economist Steve Moore, and RNC national spokesperson Paris Dennard. Great to have you all back.
Good to see you.
Hey, Shannon, good to be with you.
All right, I want to start with this from the New York Times today, talking about inflation, the problem it poses for the president, among other things. It says inflation and supply issues pose a headache for President Biden's White House as rising costs chip away at voters' paychecks and as houses and cars prove sharply more expensive and difficult to buy. Steve, where are we going?
Well, it is a big problem. It's an economic problem, and it's also a political problem. Let's not forget that Jimmy Carter lost his presidency to Ronald Reagan 40 years ago because of out-of-control inflation. And I don't think Joe Biden wants to suffer the same fate. You know, inflation is now running at somewhere between 5 and 6%, Shannon, and wages are up by about 4%. So it's not hard to understand the math there, that people's paychecks are shrinking under this president because prices are rising. There's no sign of inflation abating. And I'll say one other thing about this. If you're worried about inflation, as I am, and I think most Americans are, the absolute worst possible thing you could do is pass a $5 trillion debt bill that's basically paid for by printing money, which obviously would make inflation much, much worse.
Well, and a slew of recent polls show that Americans are keenly aware of the inflationary spike that's going on, and they are concerned about it. In fact, it's one of their top concerns. Meanwhile, it's been a tough week for Democrats, for the president, trying to get this done, especially with the president himself going over to Capitol Hill. We hear from Congressman Josh Gottheimer tonight. He's a Democrat. He's one of the more centrist Democrats there. He says this: along with a group of members, I've been working around the clock to pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill, but a small far-left faction of the House of Representatives undermined that agreement and blocked a critical vote on the bill. We cannot let this small faction on the left destroy the president's agenda. Kevin, how do Democrats get on the same page? Can they?
Yeah, Shannon, it's a great question. Good evening. I hope they do. I'm an eternal optimist as a Democrat. And of course, you're seeing this play out in real time. And that's the beauty of the Democratic Party. We're a coalition a party in that we have a left flank and a right flank. You're seeing the president really active this week and in the preceding weeks, especially with the Senate Republicans negotiating this bipartisan framework for infrastructure and obviously the budget reconciliation package. So obviously, as you said at the outset and played a clip from him, you know, there is no set timeline in this. Obviously, we want to see this happen by the fall, right, heading into the Christmas season. But of course, we're going to hash this out. And I think at the end of the day, as I said, I'm an optimist. I think we're going to get this done. Don't ever count out Speaker Pelosi. I think when it comes to caucus politics, especially in the waning years of her speakership, she has said this is, you know, something that she's really focused on. And as you know, someone that is seeing her career maybe potentially come to an end, I think she's really going to get this across the finish line.
And Paris, Kevin is right. There have been times that people mistakenly counted her out before. She is good at pulling her caucus together, at closing up the fissures, the cracks, enough at least to get some major packages across the finish line. Can she do it this time? Because, listen, what the Democrats will say is when you talk about specifics like infrastructure, it polls well across party lines. People want to see some of this get done for the country.
One thing Kevin said that was correct was the waning years of her speakership. That's right, because come 2022, Republicans are going to retire Nancy Pelosi because bills like this are not popular with the American people. The Democrats are in disarray, and this has real impact on real Americans. If this bill were to pass, it would be $27,000 of new spending for every American household. Look, I'm here in Austin, Texas tonight. We're at an RNC finance retreat, and Senator Tim Scott spoke to our group, and he talked about the content of the bill is more concerning than the cost of the bill, which is out of control. We don't even know the full extent of what's in it, but what I do tell you, when they come out with it and actually are exposed for the garbage that's inside this bill that is costing American taxpayers more and more money on top of the inflation, on top of the rising gas prices, which are a middle-class tax increase, the American people are going to reject it. And they're already rejecting it. That's why you see the poll numbers for the president taking a colossal dive, because the American people see it, they feel it, and they don't like it. This ain't working.
Okay, and to that point, almost all of the recent polls for the president have been negative. They've been trending down because of a number of crises with Afghanistan, the drone strike, inflation, all of this unrest on Capitol Hill. We only have a few seconds left, so I want to go down the line and ask each of you, do you think these two major bills get passed? And if so, what's the timeline? Very quick answer. Paris, to you first.
I hope that it doesn't get passed, but I think if the Democrats continue on this line, it's going to take forever because they're in total disarray. They have no path to getting this passed.
Kevin?
We're absolutely going to pass these two bills in conjunction with one another. The president's approval ratings will rebound. I think everybody's frustrated with the Delta variant and COVID. Once we get that under control, president's numbers will rebound, and we'll get that done for the American people.
Final word to you, Steve.
You know, President Biden, when he was campaigning for president, he said so many times, Shannon, you're not electing Bernie Sanders, you're electing me. And yet the reason this is going to be rejected is that this is the Bernie Sanders agenda. There's no voter mandate for it. Americans don't want trillions and trillions of more debt and the higher taxes and spending. So I think in the end, this is going to go down in flames, and that would be so good for the country.
Well, this is a very wonky showdown that those of us inside the Beltway, will be popping popcorn and watching over the next few days and weeks to see what happens. Panel, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, Shannon.